Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. Jack Mercer had always believed in two things: hard work and family. For 25 years, he'd done both with everything he had. His hands bore the rough calluses of a man who never ran from a job. His back ached from years of lifting steel and hope in equal measure. He had worked overtime, skipped vacations, repaired pipes, and patched roofs, all to build a life for his wife, Lorna, and their daughter, Emily. Their modest house in the suburbs wasn't flashy, but it was home. He remembered painting Emily's room pink when she was 5, even though she changed her mind halfway through and wanted purple instead. He'd repainted it that night, grumbling only half-heartedly. He loved them too much to say no. He worked the graveyard shift for years so Emily could attend piano lessons and Lorna could go back to school for a teaching degree she eventually gave up on. That was fine. Jack never kept score. So, when things began to change, he didn't notice at first. It started small, like the way dust settles slowly on a shelf. Lorna had taken an interest in a new self-help podcast, something called Awaken with Camden. The host, a man named Camden Rourke, spoke in velvet tones, preaching about authenticity, self-realization, and escaping toxic dependency cycles. Jack didn't think much of it. Everyone needed a little guidance sometimes, and if it helped Lorna feel better about her life, who was he to argue? But soon, Camden's voice was everywhere. Lorna played him during breakfast, while cooking dinner, while folding laundry. Emily, now 23 and back home after college, started quoting Camden's phrases like gospel. "I'm not responsible for how others feel about my truth," and "love cannot grow where obligation is the soil." Jack chuckled the first time he heard that last one. What does that even mean? Emily had rolled her eyes. "You wouldn't get it, Dad. It's about emotional freedom, about being real." "I thought being real meant showing up, even when it's hard. That's just sacrifice. It's not love." Camden says, Yeah, I know what Camden says." He tried to laugh it off, but something inside him stung. The tone in her voice, distant, rehearsed, almost cold, felt unfamiliar. By the time summer rolled around, Lorna and Emily were attending Awaken with Camden seminars every weekend. They came home glowing, lighter somehow, but with a strange hollowness Jack couldn't name. The house started to feel less like a home and more like a stage, and he was no longer part of the act. One Friday night, Jack came home from a 14-hour shift to find their photos, the old family portraits, missing from the walls. In their place were sleek black and white prints with vague words: freedom, flow, self. He walked into the kitchen where Lorna stood with a glass of wine and a distant look. "Where's the picture of Emily's first recital?" Lorna looked up. "Oh, I boxed some things up. We're simplifying." "Since when?" She sipped her wine. "Camden says nostalgia is a prison. We're embracing the now." Jack's jaw clenched. "You didn't think to ask me?" "I didn't think I needed to." That night, he sat in the garage, staring at the dusty boxes filled with 2 decades of memories. Their wedding album, drawings Emily made in elementary school, even the world's best dad mug she gave him when she was 10. By autumn, Camden Rourke had started visiting town in person. He hosted weekend retreats at a newly purchased wellness center on the edge of the city. Lorna became a volunteer coordinator. Emily, despite graduating with a marketing degree, turned down job offers to intern for Camden in a more spiritually aligned capacity. Jack didn't know what bothered him more, that his wife and daughter had changed so suddenly or that he had no idea how to bring them back. Then came the final blow. He got home one Thursday and noticed the garage was half empty. His tools, the same ones he'd collected over 20 years, were gone. Lorna was sitting at the kitchen table, her posture unnervingly calm. "You're downsizing my life now?" "They were just things, Jack. Camden helped me realize that attachment to material identity is a form of fear. They were mine. We sold them. The money's going to a retreat in Sedona. Camden thinks it'll be transformational for Emily." His voice cracked. You're giving my life away to a stranger who talks in riddles. He's not a stranger. He sees us. And what am I? Wallpaper? She looked away. Camden says, sometimes people grow apart when one refuses to evolve. Jack stood there in silence, feeling something collapse inside him. It wasn't rage. It was erasure. The quiet kind, like watching ink fade from an old letter until the words mean nothing at all. That weekend, he followed them to one of Camden's seminars. It was held in a repurposed art gallery. White walls, dim lights, soft music that made your heart slow down. People were seated on cushions in a circle gazing at Camden like he was made of starlight. The man was in his late 40s, clean-shaven, well-dressed, with piercing eyes, and the kind of voice that made you lean in without realizing it. Real love, Camden said, is not sacrifice. It is expansion. And expansion cannot coexist with duty. Duty kills desire. Jack watched as Lorna nodded like a schoolgirl. Emily leaned forward, scribbling in a journal. He'd heard enough. He waited until the seminar ended and approached them outside. Lorna looked startled. Emily crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I needed to see it for myself." "See what?" Lorna asked. "How easily you both forgot who I was, who we were." Emily rolled her eyes. "No one forgot you. You're just clinging." "To what? My family? My life? To the version of us that only worked for you." He stepped back, wounded. "Is that what he told you?" "No," Lorna said. "That's what I realized. Camden helped me see it, but the truth was always there. You've been just existing, not living. I was working for us, for you. That's not the same as being present." Jack left without another word. That night, he sat alone at the kitchen table, looking through old bills and receipts, the paper trail of his life. He realized something chilling. Most of the accounts were no longer in his name. The house was refinanced without him knowing. Joint savings had been rerouted. He'd been quietly erased, financially, emotionally, spiritually. And it hadn't happened overnight. It was like death by 1,000 polite affirmations. For the next few weeks, Jack began listening to Camden's podcast. Not because he believed in it, but because he wanted to understand. The more he listened, the more patterns he found. Camden's words were intoxicating, carefully designed to sow dissatisfaction while presenting himself as the cure. He wasn't helping people heal. He was helping them forget who they used to be, so he could write a new story with himself at the center. But Jack wasn't ready to disappear. He started small. Every morning, he left sticky notes around the house. On the bathroom mirror, "The strongest souls aren't loud. They endure." On the fridge, "Truth doesn't need applause to matter." On Emily's desk, "You once believed in dreams that didn't need an audience." He didn't sign them. He just left them there like breadcrumbs, hoping they'd remember the way home. One day, he came home and found one of his notes, the one on the mirror, still stuck where he left it. Someone had written underneath in small, hesitant handwriting, "Is this you?" He smiled for the first time in weeks. Jack didn't confront Camden, not yet. He knew better than to fight charisma with anger. But he started documenting. He recorded Camden's speeches, highlighted contradictions, saved testimonies from others who had once followed him and now felt lost. Quietly, carefully, he gathered truth. Because sometimes the strongest weapon isn't rage or confrontation. It's memory, it's presence, it's refusing to be forgotten. And Jack Mercer was just getting started. The mornings were getting colder. Jack could feel it in his bones, the kind of chill that crept in quietly and stayed long. He still rose before the sun, made his own coffee, and walked through the empty house. The walls were cleaner now, almost too clean, stripped of the clutter that once made it feel lived in. No photos, no knickknacks, just minimalist art and empty space. It was strange how silence could be so loud. But Jack had learned something in all the quiet. He had stopped trying to argue. That got him nowhere. Instead, he watched, listened, and waited. Something his years on the factory floor had taught him well. Patience was power when you knew what you were looking for. One evening, he got a call from his old friend and coworker, Curtis. "You all right, man? Haven't seen you at the pub in months," Jack chuckled, trying to stay out of trouble. There was a pause on the other end. "Heard some things, Jack, about your wife and that guru guy." "Camden?" Jack didn't respond. "Look," Curtis said, his voice softer. "My sister went to one of those retreats. Came back convinced her fiancé was a barrier to self-fulfillment. 2 months later, she was broke and living out of her car." Jack sat up straighter. "You serious?" "Dead serious. She said Camden helped her awaken to her higher self, but all it did was isolate her from everyone who ever cared." Jack took a breath. That was the pattern. Cut the roots, claim the tree. It wasn't just his family. This was bigger. The next day, Jack drove 2 towns over to meet Curtis's sister, Mia. She was staying with a friend now, trying to get her life back in order. Over a cup of coffee, she told Jack about the retreat. "It starts off empowering," Mia explained. "Camden makes you feel seen, like your pain is valid and your potential is limitless. But then it shifts. He starts talking about cutting ties, not just with people who hurt you, but with anyone who doesn't agree with your authentic evolution." Jack listened carefully. "It's subtle," she continued. "You think you're healing, but really you're isolating. Suddenly your parents are unconscious attachments. Your job is a fear-based identity. And anyone who questions Camden's teachings is part of the system that's trying to keep you small." Jack nodded slowly. "So you cut everyone off, and then?" "Then you give more to the group. More time, more money, more belief, until there's nothing left of who you were. Just this shell of who he says you should be." Jack left that meeting with a heavy heart, but a clearer sense of purpose. That night, he printed out pages, transcripts, recordings, quotes, testimonials. He started assembling a quiet archive of everything Camden had done. He didn't know what he was building yet, but he knew the truth had a way of growing roots. At home, things had become mechanical. Lorna barely spoke to him except in polite tones, and Emily, though less cold than before, was distant. Then, one morning, he found something unexpected. On the dining table sat a folded sheet of paper with his name written in neat, familiar handwriting. He opened it slowly. "Dad, I don't know how to feel anymore. Sometimes I hear your voice in my head, the way you used to tell me that real love shows up, even when it's tired. Camden says that's toxic, but I don't know. Is it? I'm confused. I'm trying to grow, but sometimes it feels like I'm shrinking. Please don't give up on me. Emily." He read it twice, then a third time. She was still in there. Jack didn't respond directly. Instead, he started doing something else. He cooked dinner again. Not that frozen quinoa Lorna had started buying, but the meals they used to love. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, peach cobbler. He left one of Emily's childhood drawings, a picture of the three of them holding hands, framed and placed quietly on her nightstand. And when he passed Camden's voice echoing from the speakers in the living room, he didn't react. He just turned on the old radio in the garage and let the blues play while he fixed up the broken bench he once built for Lorna's garden. He wasn't going to beg, he was going to be. And that was starting to work. One Saturday afternoon, as Jack sat in the garage polishing an old wrench, Emily walked in holding a notebook. "Hey," she said, voice low. He looked up. "Hey, kiddo." She sat beside him in silence for a while. Then, without looking at him, she asked, "Do you think I've changed?" Jack paused. "I think you're trying to figure things out. That's not bad. But I feel like I'm disappearing. And I thought awakening was supposed to feel like I was coming alive." Jack looked at her, the way he used to when she was scared, after watching a storm from her bedroom window. "Truth doesn't always sparkle," he said. "Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just doing the right thing, even when no one claps for you." She smiled faintly. "I miss us," she whispered. "Me too." A few days later, Jack returned from work to find Camden in his living room. It was the first time they'd met in person. Camden stood there, polished as always, smiling in that unnervingly calm way. Lorna stood beside him, watching. "I've heard a lot about you, Jack," Camden said smoothly. It's good to finally meet the man behind the silence. Jack nodded slowly. Wish I could say the same. Camden chuckled lightly. I get it. Change is hard for people like you. But sometimes clinging to the past is the real danger. You've become a ghost in your own home. Jack tilted his head. Funny, ghosts don't cook dinner, fix the plumbing, or leave love notes behind. They just haunt. I'm still here. Camden stepped closer. What are you hoping to accomplish, Jack? This resistance? It won't stop what's coming. Lorna and Emily have tasted freedom. Jack looked him in the eye, calm, steady. I'm not trying to stop anything, just making sure they know what they're choosing. That moment hung in the air. Camden's smile faltered for just a second. That was the crack Jack had been waiting for. A week later, Jack posted anonymously on a forum for people recovering from manipulative leadership. He shared what he'd found. Not bitterness, but facts. He uploaded audio clips, seminar contradictions, testimonies from others like Mia. He never mentioned names, never attacked, just told the truth. And the stories started rolling in. One woman wrote that her son stopped speaking to the family after a retreat. A man said he'd emptied his retirement fund chasing awakening. A couple from out of state said they were still trying to reunite with their daughter who broke free from emotional oppression, as Camden had told her to call it. The post gained traction. People were listening. Then came the message. From Camden's PR team. Polite. Professional. Threatening in tone without using any dangerous words. Jack read it, then shut the laptop. He wasn't scared. Not anymore. He looked out the window at Emily in the garden, holding the same trowel she'd used as a child. Lorna came out a few moments later and stood beside her. For the first time in a long while, they weren't speaking in guru-approved affirmations, just chatting, laughing even. The wind shifted. Something was changing. Jack didn't need to take Camden down in a fiery confrontation. That wasn't his style. No speeches, no shouting matches. He just had to remind his family, and anyone else who'd forgotten, that truth didn't need to be dramatic to be powerful. It just had to be real. And real never fades. The winter sun cast long, pale streaks of light across the yard. Jack stood at the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze. The air felt different lately. Lighter, as though the house itself was beginning to breathe again. It wasn't whole, not yet. But the fractures in his family no longer felt fatal, just healing. Emily came home earlier now. She no longer spent hours at the collective center, where Camden held his discussions and elevation circles. She still attended once a week, but it felt more out of obligation than conviction. Jack didn't ask too much. He let her come to him in her own time. One evening, she knocked on the garage door and peeked in. Jack was seated at his workbench, sanding down an old chair. Mind if I hang out for a bit? She asked. Not at all. She took the seat beside him, legs swinging like when she was a child. They didn't talk for several minutes, just the rhythm of sandpaper and soft music playing from a dusty radio in the corner. Then, quietly, she said, I read your post. The one about Camden. Someone forwarded it to me. Jack kept sanding. That so? Emily nodded. I didn't know all that, about the people who lost everything. He paused, met her eyes. You believe them. I believe you. Those words hit deeper than she knew. She continued, At first, Camden made me feel strong, like I didn't need anyone, like depending on others meant weakness. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't about strength. It was about control, making us think we were broken unless we followed his version of truth. Jack set down the sandpaper. Truth isn't owned, it's lived. Emily smiled. You always say stuff like that when it matters. He returned the smile, but he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. That weekend, Camden was scheduled to host a local conference, Unfolding the Infinite Self. Posters were plastered across town. Lorna had even volunteered to help coordinate logistics. It was the biggest event his group had ever planned in their region. Jack didn't plan to attend. But as he passed by the venue on his morning walk, he saw the line forming. Dozens of people, some nervous, others wide-eyed. He saw in them what he had once seen in his own daughter. The ache for something more, something true. He couldn't let them walk in blind. So he made a decision. He didn't protest. He didn't shout. Instead, he printed copies of the anonymous testimonies, quotes, articles, accounts from people who had walked away and recovered. He highlighted phrases like, "I thought I was finding myself, but I was giving myself away." And, "Healing shouldn't hurt your connection to those who love you." And then he stood across the street from the venue, quiet, still, just handing them out. Some people ignored him, a few scoffed. One woman even muttered, "Another bitter ex-believer." But a few stopped, a few read. One man returned after reading a page and said, "I've been feeling this for months. Just couldn't put it into words." Jack nodded. "You're not alone." Inside, Lorna helped arrange chairs and light candles at the edges of the stage. Camden arrived shortly before the event began, dressed in flowing white, his signature charm lighting the room. He greeted everyone with carefully chosen words, each phrase rehearsed to perfection. But something was off. There was a subtle tension in the air. A few seats sat empty. Several attendees were quiet, eyes flickering toward the entrance, as if reconsidering whether they should have come at all. Camden began his speech. He talked about shedding layers, about rebirth through release. He spoke of letting go of limiting identities, even roles forced upon you by society, such as husband or father. Lorna sat straighter, but when he began guiding the audience through a visualization, something unexpected happened. A young woman raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said, voice shaking. "But is it healing if it makes you feel more alone?" Camden paused, caught off guard. "Alone is often the first step toward awakening. We must lose the false to find the true." She nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. But my mom stopped speaking to me. My sister blocked me last week. I can't stop crying." "Is that part of the process too?" Murmurs spread across the room. Camden smiled, but his eyes were tense. "Resistance is natural. Discomfort precedes transformation." But then, another voice. Or maybe it's a warning. It was Lorna. Camden turned to her, brows raised. "Lorna." She stood slowly. "You said Jack was holding me back. That love, when rooted in duty, isn't love at all. And I believed you. But he's still here. After everything. After I stopped seeing him. After I made him invisible. And he never walked away." Camden's voice softened, coaxing. "That's fear talking. Old programming. Don't regress." "No," Lorna said, firmer now. "That's clarity. I confused endurance with stagnation. But Jack's not stagnant. He's solid. That's different." The room was silent. Camden tried to pivot, but the energy had shifted. His carefully constructed narrative was unraveling, not from aggression, but from quiet doubt. One by one, people stood and left. Not all, but enough. Outside, Jack saw Lorna step into the sunlight. She didn't say anything at first, just walked up and stood beside him. He glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I forgot who we were, what we had." Jack didn't say, "I told you so." He just offered her a tissue and put a hand on her shoulder. That night, they sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had once held years of laughter, arguments, birthday cakes, and hard decisions. Emily joined them, and they ate together. No affirmations, no mantras, just real conversation. It would take time. Trust had to be rebuilt, and not everything would go back to the way it was. Nor should it. But the path forward no longer felt like a fading memory. It felt like a quiet promise. Weeks passed. Camden's name faded from the town bulletin boards. His presence dimmed. Some still followed him online, but the spell was broken for many. Jack never took credit. He didn't need to. That wasn't the point. He went back to working in his garage, taking long walks, and slowly restoring parts of the house that had been neglected. Not to recreate the past, but to build a future. One evening, Emily came into the garage holding a new drawing. It was a picture of their family, the three of them standing beneath a tree. Nothing fancy. Just simple, clean lines. But this time, Jack wasn't drawn in faded pencil. He was in color. She handed it to him. Thought you might want this. He looked at it, then her. Thank you. As she turned to leave, she said softly, You never stopped being my dad, even when I stopped acting like your daughter. Jack hung the picture on the garage wall. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need applause. All he ever wanted was to be seen, not as a hero or a martyr or a victim, but as the man who stayed, the man who kept showing up. And finally, they saw him. The truth, spoken softly but lived fiercely, had done what noise never could. It had brought them home.